you mentioned the giants, Tata, Infosys, Wipro, but what's also amazing is this ecosystem, as you said, that's grown up about it. Can you talk a little bit about this, the process of, I mean, are most of these spin-offs, are they people who have, come right out of college and started with a dream? What does the typical entrepreneur in your own incubator look like?
Maybe I'll answer that in two phases, today and yesterday. So let's start with yesterday. So if I had to caricature, I'd say that the median pattern of talent mobility would be you are somebody in a slightly smaller city, you found yourself scrambling to be educated to write basic code, you moved to Bangalore or Gurgaon or Mumbai or Pune or someplace like that, got yourself a job in a software entity, worked hard, built a resume, either went overseas to study or jumped ship when they posted you somewhere else. That was the mobility pattern. In the last decade or so, things are quite a bit different. The software companies continue to scramble for talent, and I've been trying to document how much more important talent from the deep interior of India has become to these companies, simply because people in the urban areas have access to global information, global sources of capital. So many of our risk capital providers from this country and from Europe are relocated to Bangalore in particular. So they have no trouble doing other things, including doing their own startups. So the software companies have now started to tap into tier 2, tier 3, even further cities, and have built out a really quite robust infrastructure, which I think is a nice development for India, given that the government is sort of asleep.
But it reminds us how thriving cities can be engines of opportunity for people
Absolutely.
living far away.
Yeah,
right?
and as you've often documented, I believe, there are many channels through which this happens, right? In this case, you are spurring, the software industry is spurring an infrastructure not just in the immediate ambience, but in creating mini training cities pretty far away, half a subcontinent away, to train people to come and get jobs in the software industry. And every mother in every little village knows that if her son or daughter can write a little bit of code, that's their ticket, as much as speak a few sentences of English.
Can you tell us about your own incubator? This is a sort of amazing thing that you do in Bangalore.
So a few of my friends and I, the others are all ex-Infosys, including two of the original founders of Infosys. And I started an incubator in the heart of Bangalore, very close to the tech cluster, which is a small area called Koramangala, which looks just like San Francisco. And we are really doing this to truly upgrade the entrepreneurship ecosystem in India. And what that's meant is, that we do a lot of advocacy and general free proselytizing, if you want to call it that, about the role that entrepreneurs should play. Just as a small example of that, the scourge of India and China and the Middle East, which, as you know, is where I hang out, other than Harvard Square, is diabetes. It will destroy every one of these countries. Destroy. So I've created a Bangalore-Singapore company, Bangalore-Singapore-Boston company, that now does very cheap, very accurate diabetes and cardiac and renal failure diagnosis on any smartphone in the world. So it's really novel technology. Through that, I got to know about the space and what needed to be done. So we brought together endocrinologists, medical device specialists, the limited number of health insurers in India, some diabetic patients, some pharma companies that were making insulin and associated drugs for treatment of the chronic disease. We then made that available to the public at large to say that this is the problem statement in simple conversational fashion with bona fide experts. We then went one step further and said, out of this, here's our contribution, is to say, here are 5 actionable business ideas. Now my target for this is not so much the young entrepreneur who probably wouldn't have the wherewithal to do anything even with this problem statement. But you know what, in the large corporations, in the Wipros and TCSs, and the biocons, which is our leading biotech firm, there are tens of thousands of middle managers, for many of whom it's a dead end. They're sitting there and thinking, there's a boom going on here. How do I get in on it? And I'm saying, here it is. Here are 5 problems. Come and do one. There's space in my incubator. We'll give you the angel money. You try it. If it looks like you have the basic qualifications, we'll help you put together a team. And then let's see what happens. So we ran a competition for it.
Based on the problems that you gave them. So
based on the problems that we gave them. So we put it out as a challenge and said, here's the challenge.
Great.
So we're curating the ecosystem is the point that I'm trying to make, and trying to be the catalyst that makes it happen. To be an entrepreneur in a place like a developing country, you have to not just create your venture, you have to create the conditions to create. You have to fill in these infrastructural limitations. You have to compensate for these voids in the ambiance to allow something to happen.
Right.
And sometimes people say, when I'm presenting to government officials or other investors, they say, you're being unreasonable. I said, yes, I am putting a lot of weight on the entrepreneur, but it's a lot less unreasonable than the Sisyphean task of waiting for the state to wake up and then finding that there's some governance problem, the whole thing collapses on you. That this is a more practical way to go ahead, to build it one piece at a time, and create it so that ultimately the state can jump on board and help you scale it up. And you know what, at that time we'll give the state the credit. It's fine.